Let's see here. Perfect. All right, guys. So if you are on the phone with somebody right now, go ahead and get that wrapped up. If you are off the phone with someone right now, then go ahead and do me a favor. I'm going to need your stats in the chat for me. We're going to switch gears into our teaching portion of the workshop. And Nettie, I actually have a random question here for you because I know you were here last week with me. Did I do selling sets last week or did I do dropping down? Do you happen to remember? I'll let you try and look that up here in a second. But for everybody else, Cameron, Cece, Brinja, Perla, make sure you guys flick those cameras on so I can see all y'all's beautiful faces here this morning. So while you guys are getting situated, I need you guys to put your stats in the chat. So here's what I mean by that. I need to see how many calls that you made, how many demos you got booked. So for example, if you made 15 calls and you booked 2 demos, you can put something that looks like 15/2. So it'll look just like that as an example. So go ahead and flick your cameras on. I need to make sure that you're here and you're not sleeping in bed or you're off doing something else right now. I got to make sure if you're here, I got to make sure that you're here. So make sure you get those cameras on so I can see the beautiful faces. And like I said, put your stats in the chat box. And then I'm going to go ahead and pull the workshop agenda here so I can share it with all of y'all. So it'll be great. And then, I think Nettie got frozen there real quick. It looks that way. Not a problem. All right, guys, I'm gonna go ahead and throw the link for the workshop into the chat here. So you guys can go ahead and click that and follow along as we go through everything today. Make sure you get your stats in the chat. I'm gonna need to get that so that we can record how we're doing throughout the summertime for these workshops. Looks like Anthony made 12 calls, booked 2 demos. Love to see it, Anthony, so that's great. Make sure everyone else get your stats in there and then go ahead and click that link in the chat box and so we can go ahead and get started. So I know most of you guys I haven't met before because I know a lot of you guys are new this summer. But just to introduce myself, my name is Dante Reynolds. I'm the events team coordinator for the Gulf Coast Division based out of Austin, Texas. I also coordinate the Lone Star Division with the events program. And basically my job here this summer is to run a weekly workshop for all the first year reps to help you guys get better faster. And so we're going to be cycling through topics throughout the summertime on the days that I'm running them. Personally, at $2 million in personal sales with Cutco, have sold 300K in a year, had sold 80K in a month, 30K in a week. Been doing Cutco for about 15 years now. Started in college back in the day. So I'm here to help you guys basically cut that learning curve down and have you guys sell more Cutco. Looks like CC made 13 calls and booked 1. Love to see that. We got Brinja with 10 calls with 1 demo booked. So if we can get the rest of you guys in there, looks like Cameron, looks like Perla, Nettie, I believe. I need to have you guys put your stats in that box as well too. So make sure to get that done. So if you haven't already, make sure you click that link in the chat box so we can go ahead and get started here. So today, guys, we're going to be going over selling sets. So probably one of the 2 most important topics whenever you're selling Cutco is learning how to sell more sets more often. You guys have all been through training, obviously, at this point. You guys have all gone through the same process. You guys all have the same training manual. The great thing I love about the training manual is that every single summer that goes by, they take everything from people like me and other Cutco sales professionals is what they call us across the country. And they basically update the manual so that way all the new guys get all the latest and greatest stuff to sell more Cutco. Which I know you guys are new, but in the last 10 years that I've been with Cutco, the averages for our new guys have gone up exponentially over that 10-year span. And Cutco reps are selling more than they ever have before, which is pretty wild. So we're going to be talking about one of the most exciting subjects, which is going to be selling more sets, which at the end of the day, that's really what we want to get accomplished, whether it's a homemaker, a signature, maybe an ultimate set, a galley set, what have you. There's basic premises to selling more sets more often. So I got 3 bullet points here for you guys. First one here is going to be on building value. And by the way, notes, this is going to be about the time you want to start taking notes with this. If you have any questions, by the way, or if there's anything I need to basically go through or clarify again or anything, just save that for the end. I always leave a few minutes open for Q&A in case I need to cover something one more time. So make sure you're ready for that. So we're going to be hitting on building value. Obviously, one of the most important parts of selling Cutco is following the manual to the T. And the manual is great at building the values. So the price outweighs the cost. May I have this backwards. The value outweighs the price of Cutco. For you guys that have family that have had Cutco for 5, 10, 15, 20, maybe even 30 years or longer, you guys obviously, I'm preaching to the choir here that Cutco kind of sells itself. Now, when you're selling to a new customer, though, they may not know that. So our job is to build value and why it's worth it. The second point that we're going to be hitting on here today is going to be the names and uses. So what I mean by that is in order to sell more sets, people have to see the value that comes in the sets. If people only feel like they're going to use two knives, it's not going to make a lot of sense for them to probably want to buy a set. I'm sure we can all agree about that. Makes sense. But if you do a great job with your names and uses, they see value in most of the pieces. Notice I'm saying most, not all the pieces, but most of the pieces they're going to use pretty much every day or every week. There's a higher probability that they're going to want to buy a set because it makes sense to buy a set. The third thing that we're going to talk about here today is remembering that rapport is key. Cutco is a great product, best in class, top of the industry, best guarantee, 15 years of selling knives to this day. Still haven't found a better warranty than Cutco's guarantee in the knife world, for sure. So, but we have to remember is just because it's a great product and it should sell itself, it still means that you have to make sure to build great rapport with your customers. If people like you and they trust you, there's a high probability they're going to feel comfortable buying from you. And this is just a skill for life that I'm sure you guys probably heard that phrase so far in your Cutco time with us. A lot of the different values, a lot of different skills you learn with Cutco are going to apply to everything in Cutco and outside of Cutco. Rapport building is one of the most important skills that you can learn, and I'm going to talk about that today too. So with that being said, let's go and dive deep on the first point here, which is going to be on building value. So first part on building value, I have a couple little like bullet points on this. First thing is that the general premise of building value means that it has to be expensive. But I mean it has to be expensive, I mean that it has to sound more expensive than it actually is. Because here's the reality, guys, is that Cutco's not a cheap product, and it never will be. But Cutco sells so many knives over the course of 75 years. Clearly, there's a method to the madness. People love buying Cutco, whether it's one knife or big sets or sets for the kids, flatware, whatever it may be. The point is that it's good stuff and the world knows it. So the point I'm trying to make with you guys is that when you're selling Cutco to a brand new customer, one of the most important things you have to make sure to nail with them is that the Cutco product is great, but you have to make sure that by the time the demo is near the end and you're getting to like the closing part of it, Cutco needs to sound about 2 to 3 times more expensive than it actually does. So think about it this way. If we'll just take Cutco out of the mix for a second, just an easy analogy here. If I rolled up like a 7 Series BMW, brand new, or not even rolled it up, I just helicoptered in, it literally has 0 miles. And when you walk up to it and the dealer says it's $3,000, it's brand new, it's worth about 100 grand, but you only pay $3,000 today because it's just your lucky day. Do you think probably a lot of people are kind of probably find a way to spend $3,000 on that car? Duh, right? It'd be silly if you didn't. But let's go ahead and flip it around. Let's keep the price the same. Let's kind of helicopter that BMW out of the way. And let's put a candy bar there. And they said today only is your lucky day. It's $3,000 for this Milky Way bar. Is anyone going to be jumping for that? Obviously not, because the price is the same, but the value is very different. So you have to remember is that whenever you're doing your demo, Cutco's not cheap, but in the grand scheme of things, it really is. Because the idea that you can buy something once and have a forever guarantee, and we do all the service and the replacement and use it every day for 50, 60, 70 years and give it to your kids, I don't know too many things nowadays that are made like that. I mean, hell, back in the day, you guys probably had like a grandma. I know I certainly had one that had a refrigerator from like the 60s and it was built like a tank and it still works. But the refrigerators that you buy nowadays, the ice machine breaks after a few years. I'm sure a lot of us can probably relate to knowing about that kind of stuff. But you have to make sure to remember that it has to sound expensive. One of the main things I like to highlight in y'all's manual for this part is you guys know there's a section in your demo where I believe it's trying to remember features and benefits is what they call it, where they constantly use the word or use the phrasing. Now this makes the Cutco product great, but it's more expensive because blank, blank, and blank. Does that sound kind of familiar to you guys? The thermal resin handle is great for these reasons. Now it is more expensive, but it's worth it because of all of these reasons. The double D edge is great because of all these reasons, but it makes it more expensive, but it's worth it because of all these reasons. You guys see where I'm going with this? The idea is every time that you say that, and you'll notice in that section, it says it like 5, 6, 7 times or something. Because every time you say the phrasing, now it makes it more expensive, but it's worth it because fill in the blank. Obviously, is the price expectation going down or is it going up in the customer's head? Obviously up. So the idea is that you have to make sure to be confident with using that phrasing. So that way, by the time that you get to the homemaker part, instead of it being 1,600, they'll probably think it's at least 3,000, which isn't a great place to be, or is a great place to be. Second bullet point on this is you have to have 100% product conviction. Here's what I mean by this. Now, I'm sure all of you guys, when you're selling Cutco, I'm sure to agree, you guys are like, I know a lot of you guys are younger, probably don't cook every day. Maybe you do, maybe you don't, I'm not sure. But the idea is that you have to have 100% product conviction in what you're selling. Because if you don't believe in it at the end of the day, like you don't believe Cutco is a good knife or a good product or a good guarantee or anything like that, do you think you're going to have an easy time selling it? Of course not. The idea is that you have to have full conviction and confidence in what you're doing. So I'm kind of curious, and this is going to be kind of like a group question. So I'm going to need your hands here for a second. So on a scale of 1 to 10, and be totally honest, by the way, that way I kind of have a feel of the room of what we're working with here this morning. 1 being that you don't think it's worth it. 10, you're like, it's absolutely worth it. On a scale of 1 to 10, where do you fall into the fact that you believe that Cutco is worth it? Are you a 1? Are you a 10? I see a couple of 10s, and kind of hold them up for me for a second so that way I can kind of see. We got 10, 10. Really? That's great. I love that. Okay, cool. Perfect. I'm speaking to the right room right now. That's awesome. So the idea is I don't need to sell you guys on this concept at all. You guys obviously believe in what you're doing. That is great. You're going to be good salespeople that way. Third bullet point on this is going to be you have to check both boxes. Here's the three. Here's what I mean by that. When a customer wants to buy Cutco, it's not really a question on are the knives good? It's not really a question on like, are the knives going to last? It's not really a question on other people have it, do they like it or not? Because if you talk to anyone that owns Cutco, it is a rare, like beyond rare, like I'm talking lunar eclipse type rare moment that someone has Cutco and doesn't like it. By a show of hands here, who here actually knows someone that owns Cutco already? Mom, dad, relative, neighbor. I'm assuming they're all pretty raving fans about it. One of their favorite knives that they've owned. Yeah, it's like that for a reason. So we don't have to worry about any of that. That's one of the biggest issues most companies have to work with when they're trying to sell stuff is their stuff isn't the best. It doesn't have the best service and it sure as hell doesn't have the best guarantee. You guys get all of that. And you get 75 years of doing it. It's not a new company by any means. So when you're trying to get people to buy Cutco when you're doing your demo, you just always have to remember this. As long as the money makes sense, and as long as they feel like they're going to use most of the knives in the set, there's really not a lot of strong reasons why someone wouldn't want to buy a set. Now, some people may want to buy an ultimate, but maybe they can't afford the ultimate today, but maybe they can afford a galley. Maybe they want a signature. Maybe they can't quite afford it today for whatever reason, but they could afford an essential set. You guys see where I'm going with this? So just because someone says no to maybe a bigger set doesn't mean they don't like Cutco, doesn't mean they don't like you or anything like that. It just simply means that you just need to find the right set that works for them. So as long as the money makes sense and the knives make sense, then they're probably going to say yes. Let's go to our second main point here, which is names and uses. First bullet point on this, you have to believe in what's included in each set. So this kind of like circles back to the original point on product conviction. Now it's actually having conviction in what comes in the set itself. So let's keep it really simple. Let's talk about the homemaker plus 8, because that is what you guys are all trained to show when you're brand new in your first year. Sell lots of homemakers. Homemaker sets are not that hard to sell. You won't sell them to everybody. Most people will say no for whatever reason, but you will sell a lot of galleys, a lot of starter sets, and so on and so forth. So with that being said, though, if we just look at the homemaker plus 8, if you had to kind of look at it in your mind real quick, so again, this is gonna be kind of like a group thing here. Paring knife, trimmer, spatula, bless you, petite carver, forks, petite chef, slicer, all the way down the line. If you had to actually mentally look at a homemaker plus 8 set, is there anything in that set that you look at where you're like, I mean, it's cool, but I don't think it's really needed, or I don't really see the value in that, or I'm not really excited about that one piece. So I'm going to kind of like open up the space here for a minute. And I just kind of want to ask you guys if there's anything in that homemaker plus 8 where you're kind of like, it's cool, but whatever. Anything that you're not fully bought into. So Cameron,
A lot of
oh yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, a lot of customers wonder why there's two forks in the set.
Very common.
Um, yeah.
Absolutely. Does anyone here get the fork objection? I don't know if I need both forks. Okay, cool. By the way, I used to get that all the freaking time. But there's a friend of mine named Seth Kinzer he's me, but up in Minnesota. And so Seth has sold a whole bunch of Cutco, way more than I have. And I think this was probably like 6 years ago. He was running a workshop for me. And I remember asking him the fork question. I was like, hey, man, you know, help me get over the forks. I see the value in the forks, but I'm not really doing a good job like explaining that to customers. He's like, oh, yeah, like super simple. Here's how you do it. So here's what I'm going to do for you guys. I'm just going to role play my forks with you. Okay. Paring knife, trimmer, spatula, petite cover, all that stuff. All right, we get to the forks now. Get to the turning fork. Hey, so the great thing about the forks, Mrs. Jones, is that most people, when they look at the forks, they assume they're quote just forks, but most people don't realize they're almost as sharp as their knives. So I don't know if you guys ever do any meats like chickens, roasts, anything along those lines, or like turkey or anything like that from time to time, but they're actually almost as sharp as the knives. So what my mom does was that whenever she's doing meat for us, she'll take out the forks. She'll actually use the sharp points to shred them, basically like little Wolverine claws. She just puts the chicken breast down, shreds all the meat, cleans the forks, and puts them back in the block afterwards. They're also great for cherries, pickles, and olives out of jars. But if you ever do meat, they're great for shredding all the meat. You don't have to pull out a knife to do it or use your hands. When you do it that way, people have that makes sense moment. And ever since I started doing that, my amount of people that have said, I don't know if I'm going to use the forks has gone exponentially down. So if you didn't catch that, make sure to write down some of those bullet points. You still want to follow your manual. Your manual is king, but that's a little something extra that you can add to it now that to help you sell those forks. So you can kind of get rid of that objection. I figured that one was coming early, but that was a good question, Bridget. All right, let's do one more here. What's another one besides the forks that you guys are like, I don't know.
The one I get is a spatula.
Really?
Um,
Okay.
because they usually say it's not needed, and I have the homemaker, and I kind of like don't particularly like it at all
Mhm.
in my set.
My heart
So
is broken. It's so sad
I'm
right
sorry. It's like
now.
I don't use it. Like I feel like it's not needed.
Yeah,
That's my opinion, but I try to keep that away from the demos.
for sure. So I'm gonna, by the way, that's valid to bring up. In my 15 years of selling Cutco, that is the piece in the homemaker that is the complete love it or it collects dust. I can't tell you how many customers I've seen where they've had a homemaker for 50 years and they like the spatula has never been touched. And then you have people that have had it for 25 years where they're like, the husband comes up who doesn't cook and he's like, best knife you guys ever made. It's so like opposite ends of the spectrum, right? So here's the deal. You can't think of it as a spatula. And this is a good, I'm glad you brought up this point of like, you're personally like, it sounds like not maybe very excited about the spatula yourself. And I will tell you guys, you have to make sure, again, obviously, like if you're trying to keep that away from your demo, that's good. But you yourself have to sell yourself on everything that we make. And so I've had pieces when I was new that I wasn't like over the moon about. And then once I learned, like the salmon knife, I don't know if you guys ever used our salmon knife. There was one time I was working in events, we work on the events team. I was working at a trade show. It was super slow. And I was like, why is everyone so hyped about this salmon freaking knife? And then I just took it and I took a potato and it just went and it just like cut through the potato like a lightsaber. And I was hooked ever since. And now it's actually one of my most favorite knives we make. And it's actually one of the best knives we sell. So I use that example. Let's talk about the spatula spreader for a second, right? Here's how I sell a spatula spreader. I do the same stuff your manual has, and my little extra sauce to it afterwards is I'm just saying something along these lines. Now, Mrs. Jones, I know Cutco calls it the spatula spreader. I actually know it as like the knife spreader. And the reason why is because do you guys ever do like sandwiches, pies, avocados, anything like that from time to time? And they'll usually say yes. I was like, cool. So the great thing about this for sandwiches is that if you have kids or just like to make sandwiches yourself, what my customers like to use is the wide part of the spreader to scoop, spread, and then use the knife edge to cut the crust and cut the sandwich in half afterwards. So only have one knife to clean. If you ever do avocados, hands down, best avocado knife we make. My wife does avocado toast in the morning pretty much every morning. So she'll use the sharp edge of the spatula knife to go ahead and open it up. And then she'll flip to the dull side to scoop everything out. And then she'll spread it on her toast, clean it, put it back in the block, just like so. So if you ever do anything like that from time to time, one of our best pieces for that. So when you phrase it that way, it's going to hit home with more people. Now, I'm not saying that every person's going to use every knife every day. Not saying that. But the idea is that your customers don't need to be thinking, I'm going to use it every day or multiple times a day. What they need to be thinking is, okay, this is something I could see myself using maybe once or twice a week, or maybe a few times a month, or during busy seasons. Guys, when someone buys a set of Cutco, they're investing for over 50 years of owning it. They're going to use it pretty much every day for the most part. There will be pieces like a paring knife and a trimmer they use literally every day. Chef's knife every once in a while, slicer here and there. But the point being is that you have all of it, so that way you don't have to worry about it ever again. So Cece, I'm glad you brought up the spatula spreader, because that's actually a kind of a hit or miss one, like I mentioned. But try to use that kind of phrasing on the back end of it and call it a knife spreader from now on, and you'll get some more people that get excited. For some reason, every time I mention avocado and I do the avocado analogy with them, they get pretty excited about that. So it kind of brings me to my next point here, guys, is that you have to sell the key pieces. Now, what are the key pieces of a homemaker? It's probably not the ones that you think they are. The knives that sell themselves in a homemaker set is a paring knife, a trimmer, a chef's knife, those kinds of things. Those all sell themselves. There's not very many people that are like, I'm never going to use the trimmer. If they say that, we got to fix some things with them. But the trimmer is great and super awesome. What you got to sell them on is the pieces that most people, it can be hit or miss with, or they're just not sure how to use them. A lot of customers will say things like, I just use one knife for everything. What they're really saying is that they don't know what to use most of the knives for. Now, I'm talking about like an average mom and dad. I'm not talking about someone who cooks at a 5-star restaurant and uses 3 knives for everything because they're professionals. I'm not talking about those people. I'm talking about your average mom and dad, like the people you're showing Cutco to. All right. So the idea is really simple. The spatula spreader is one of these key pieces. It can be hit or miss with people. If you sell them on the spatula spreader, you sell them on the forks, you sell them on the butcher knife, there's a high probability that they're going to already want the rest of it. So they're going to be more open to buying that set. Now we've already handled the forks and brought up the spatula. So those are all checked off the list. So let's talk about the butcher knife. I don't know if any of you guys ever have problems with butcher knives or customers objecting to a butcher knife or not. I don't know if I need that kind of thing. But the easiest thing to do, guys, when you're talking about a butcher knife and a carving set, you just have to ask this one question. Hey, just curious, Mrs. Jones, do you guys ever do any barbecuing, grilling, or do any meat every once in a while? You don't go into the butcher knife talking about watermelons. Now, it is a good knife for splitting open the watermelon, doing all that, but its primary use really is doing grilling. The carving set is awesome, but you're not going to use it every day. But most people will use it on their brisket, their ribs, their turkeys, things like that. And it's a great set for that stuff, especially with that big fork. I use it all the time when I grill. So before you get into the butcher knife and the carving set, just ask that one question. Hey, just curious, do you guys do any grilling, barbecuing, or any meat from time to time? And you'll notice I keep saying the phrasing at the end every once in a while, from time to time, here and there, sometimes. I'm using that kind of phrasing at the end of it because I don't want customers thinking that, well, unless I use it every day, we don't want people thinking that way. The idea is, again, you're not going to use the butcher knife every day, but when you do grill, you're going to be really grateful that you have it. So that's why I always use the phrasing at the end. Do you ever do blank every once in a while, here and there, sometimes, etc. So throw that in there for some of your pieces, and you'd be surprised how many people go, yeah, I do that sometimes. Versus if you say, yeah, do you barbecue? And they're like, not very often. Well, that's totally a different way that this could go. Hopefully that makes sense for you guys. Okay, so the third bullet point on this is going to be using stories. And so when I talk about using stories, you can either use yours or you can use other people's. So here's a great example of this. When I sell the can opener, I use my grandma every time. For you guys that don't know, my grandma's almost 90, really bad carpal tunnel, arthritis in her hands, like her hands are messed up. She can't really grip a lot of things anymore. However, my grandma likes to still make certain things in the kitchen, but she can't really hold knives anymore. She can hold a couple of knives. I've given her a lot of Cutco over the years. But with can opener, the one that we make, it's the only can opener that she can grip. And because it's so sharp and so good, she can actually use it without having to put really any effort into it. So when I'm selling a can opener, here's how it sounds. So Miss Jones, I don't know if you guys ever use can openers every once in a while or anything. Most people tell me they're getting like the cheap $5 and $10 ones from like H-E-B at Walmart and kind of go through the mill of them every few months, you know? So what's cool about this is that it's super sharp, just like the knives. You got to be careful with it. The blade is angled inwards versus up and down, so it cuts more on the inside of the can, doesn't leave a sharp edge. Now, the cool thing about this is actually my grandma's favorite piece of Cutco. And the reason why is because she's a little older. She has really bad carpal tunnel and arthritis, working on computers most of her life. And what she really likes is the fact that she can cut it and then it has a magnet on the bottom. So what she does is she just pops the top off afterwards and then she puts it in the dishwasher and it self-cleans pretty easily. Now you'll notice that I'm still demoing the can opener, but the difference is I'm telling a story because my grandma really likes it. Can you see how that comes off more personal versus just very generic? So I want to make sure you guys understand that whenever you're doing this, you have someone joining here pretty late. Get to you here in a minute, Christina. So the point I'm trying to make here with you guys is very simple, is that you got to use these stories. Let me go and give you guys another analogy. Whenever I'm talking about the petite santoku, let's do a different one. Let's do a knife that's more common. What does Angie like to use a lot? Oh, yeah. So the paring knife. So my wife cooks a whole bunch for me, like a whole bunch. Good morning, Christina. I hope you know that we started at 8 o'clock today. So I know we're already in our teaching part here right now, so you're probably missing most of the stuff and everything. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove you here this time, but in the future, I would ask that you show up on time, okay? There we go. So I just want to make sure that you guys know that if you show up late to a workshop, like way too late, it just, you guys showed up here on time. Other people did not. Those people aren't going to be welcomed in. They can show up next time. Okay. So let's go ahead and keep moving here. So with that being said, my wife really loves the paring knife. She uses it literally every single day. She has two of them in her block because the one's always dirty. So when I sell the paring knife, I do the same demo as you guys always do. I go, hey, paring knife's good for this, this, and this, and this, and this. Now, this is actually one of my wife's favorite pieces of Cutco because whenever she wakes up in the morning and she's cutting all of her like apples and strawberries, bananas, and things like that, it's a short little blade with a long handle. It just fits perfectly for her and it just cuts every time. So literally one of her favorite pieces. Again, can you see how the story makes it more personal versus just a generic, like, this is what a paring knife is for? I'm still saying the same words, but I'm adding the story of my wife in there. So what I would recommend to you guys is that if you have stories yourself, you want to make sure to have those in the back pocket of your brain. So if you have personal favorite pieces, you want to share that with your customer. So if you're talking about a chef's knife and that's like your favorite thing that Cutco makes, it's totally good to go in there and say, by the way, this is one of my favorite pieces of Cutco because I use it for all of these things. This is one of my mom's favorite pieces of Cutco because she uses it for all these things. And if you don't have a lot of stories yourself yet, that's okay. Steal them from me, steal them from your manager, other reps from the office, and you can just say something along the lines of, hey, there's actually a guy I work with named Dante. His grandma loves the can opener because of these reasons. So all you have to do is just add that little blurb of, hey, this person I work with, his mom loves this because of this. If you could, excuse me, if you can use more stories, then it's going to help you with your sales process. Makes it a lot more relatable. People buy into that stuff very strongly. Okay, I put a one-liner in here for you guys. I want to make sure you guys write this into your notes too, because this is super money for those customers. I don't know if you guys have had this happen yet, but I'm sure you will at one point, that after you did all your names and uses and you did everything you were supposed to do, every once in a while you're going to get that customer that says, I love this set, but is there any way I can get it without this one piece? By a show of hands, who here has gotten that yet? Okay, a few of y'all. You guys will all get it at some point. So what I've learned is that if you just say this line to a customer, it's going to negate a lot of those people. If you just remind them, it's literally less expensive to just buy the set as is versus piecing it all out. So when a customer tells me like, hey, I want to get this set, Dante, but is there any way that I can get it without this one piece? My reply to him is like, absolutely, Mrs. Jones, I can totally do that for you. By the way, just so you know, and then here's the line. Even if you feel like you won't use that one piece, it's still a better deal to buy it as a set and giving it away versus breaking it up and buying it piece by piece. So I want to make sure you guys hear that again. Even if you feel like you won't use this knife, it's still a better deal to buy it as a set and giving it away versus breaking it up and buying it piece by piece. I realize that. There we go. And I want to make sure you guys remember why that's the case. Because if they bought the homemaker set individually, it's about $1,800 to $1,900 worth of stuff. But when a customer buys a homemaker as is, they save about $250 because it's a set. So customers don't always think of it that way. So you have to remind them, and that's a good way to remind them. I literally had a customer, I want to say about 2.5 weeks ago, I was working an event, and she's like, my grandma has Cutco, my mom has Cutco, my best friend has Cutco, my sister has Cutco, and I've never bought Cutco. And we go through the whole demo. I find out the reasons why. We find a small set that works for her budget. And I think it was a galley set is what she wanted. And she said, hey, I really, really want to get this galley set, but is there any way I can get it without the fork? And I was like, absolutely. And I said the line, and then she just laughed and she's like, yeah, that kind of makes sense. I'll figure out something to do with it. I'll just take that set then. So it will come up every once in a while, even if you do a great job with names and uses, just keep that in your back pocket for when you need it. Third bullet point here. Rapport is key to closing big. This is massive. Because here's the deal, guys. At the end of the day, you're going to build lots of value. So the money makes sense. Cutco is worth it tenfold. The second thing is you got to make sure to nail those names and uses so they want to buy a set because they see the value in the set. But again, just like anything else, rapport is the key to closing big. People want to buy Cutco and people really love it once they have it at their house. But the reality is for a brand new customer, maybe they had never spent this much on good knives before, which 90+% of people haven't. So this is their first time doing this. So you need to give them confidence and they need to have trust with you that the decision they're about to make this purchase is a good decision. And we all know it is. But you can't just say, it's a good decision, trust me. It doesn't work that way. You have to make sure to build good rapport. And if you build good rapport, you will establish trust and people will be more open to buying from you. So let's go ahead and hit the main parts, what it means about building rapport. Customers feel more comfortable spending more when they feel comfortable with you. Now, here's a misconception about what building rapport is. When you're newer, a lot of what you're taught about building rapport is spend 5 to 10 minutes at the beginning of your demo, asking them personal questions, create a conversation, so on and so forth. I'm sure that all sounds familiar. Guys, I probably spend about 15 to 30 minutes building rapport with most people. Sometimes if I'm really clicking with someone, maybe an hour plus. Now, I know when I say that sometimes a lot of new reps will be like, how the heck do you talk to someone before you even show them Cutco for that long? Well, I'll tell you this. I'm a super introverted person, but I've also been doing this for 15 years. So I'm a completely different person than I was when I first started selling Cutco. So if you're an introverted person that maybe isn't great at conversation, rapport type stuff, you'll get there. This is one of the best jobs for teaching you that at a young age. I can guarantee you that. I wouldn't have what I have now. Like if you guys ever meet my wife is way out of my league, like way out of my league. And the reason why is because I was just really good at conversation and developed confidence over time. So the idea I want to make sure you guys know is that when you're building rapport with someone, your goal is at the beginning of the demo to ask them, questions, create a conversation, all that good stuff. But rapport also happens during the demo too. So a lot of people make the mistake of building rapport at the beginning, and then once they start the demo, they just go straight into sales mode and they don't create a conversation while they're doing it. Now, here's what I mean by that. You still want to follow your manual word for word because it has everything that you need there. You'll sell Cutco by reading that. The reality is that you also want to mix in any type of questions when they need. So here's what I mean by that. When I'm talking about the spatula spreader, I always make the B sharp joke. Have y'all been taught the B sharp joke yet? Oh, okay, buckle up and strap in, guys. You're ready. This is a dad joke for the ages. So when I talk about the spatula spreader, I do everything. I talk about it, use the story of someone that I know that loves it. And at the end, I'll be like, hey, by the way, the best thing about this, Brinja, is the fact that it's actually our best musical instrument. Did you know that? And I'll be like, no, they're confused. Well, were you ever in band or choir or anything like that by chance? It doesn't matter if they say yes or no. Okay, cool. Well, let me go ahead and show you this. It actually is, I'm going to play a note for you real quick, and I'm just curious if you can guess what note it is. I take the spatula spreader out, I put it on the table, and I go ding, 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 and it makes that little like high-pitched sound. And like, can you guess what note that is? I'd be like, no, what is this guy talking about? Like, it's a B sharp because your Cutco knives are always going to be sharp, Mrs. Jones. So, and then they laugh. Yep, like literally the reactions are the reactions that customers get. I know, dad jokes 10 out of 10. So with that being said, that kind of stuff though builds connection and it builds rapport. And that's the point. So start with the B sharp joke with the spatula. You may not stick the landing the first time doing it, but I promise it gets better over time. But there's 1,000 different jokes that you can get from your managers. I'm sure they have a whole book full of them. And you want to grab your favorites, put it into your demo, and it makes the demo more light and fun. Have you ever done a demo for someone where you felt like you were just yapping at them the whole time? Didn't feel like you were really like you were just like talk, and they're not really saying anything. Kind of makes it weird after a while. So a good way to like prevent that is by using cheesy jokes. You'll get better over time with your demo. Like you guys are all new. You're not supposed to be great at it at first. Like rarely, if I was terrible at this job when I first started, but I got good over time. And so just make sure to remember the basics of rapport at the beginning is great, but also mix in rapport during the demo too. Next thing here is going to be sharing goals tilts customers into making bigger purchases. You know, this is something that when I was a brand new rep, like my first couple of years, I remember being in college and just selling Cutco trying to make it. And I remember sharing my goals with customers and I didn't like sharing my goals because I was like, no, I want them to buy Cutco. It's great. I don't want them to buy Cutco because it's my goals. And I was just always weird about it. And then what I started realizing was I went field training with a rep a long time ago, like a rep that was at the time way higher level in sales than me. And I watched him go in there, do his demo, and he shared his goals. But he did a great job sharing his goals. He was a master at it. And I remember by the time the demo was near the end, the customer was deciding whether to buy something small or something bigger. And they decided to buy something bigger. And the point of the story is this. The husband looked at the wife and said, I'm fine with either one, honey. Which one do you want to get? And the wife looks at him, looks at the rep, looks at me. I'm just sitting there taking notes like a little college kid. And she's like, well, let's go ahead and get the bigger one because it helps him with his goals. And I want it anyways. So if we're going to get it anyways, might as well just get it from him. And that's when the light bulb went off. And I was like, people don't spend that much money on something only to just be nice. Most people will buy something that they already want to buy, but they'll justify the purchase because it helps somebody out. Guys, I don't need 50 boxes of Girl Scout cookies, but I don't buy 50 boxes, by the way, for the record, but I probably buy like 20 of them every season. And here's why. I don't need the extra Girl Scout cookie boxes, but I do stash them over the course of a year until the next season. And so when I run across a Girl Scout who is like not really engaged, her mom's really doing all the work, she's not really doing much, I buy maybe a box or two, but I'll always remember this one Girl Scout. This was probably about 2 years ago. I remember walking out of a Jason's Deli and this girl just like hops out of thin air. She's super bubbly, she's focused, she's dialed in. She's like, you know, get Girl Scout cookies? She's like, oh, I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. I just bought some actually earlier today. She's like, oh, that's amazing. Which ones didn't you buy? And I was like, this girl's in it. And so she brings me over to the table and she's like, yeah, so this, and this, they're $5 each. I was like, yeah, I'll take this many boxes. And she's like, well, just so you know, I have these big goals I'm trying to hit. I'm trying to sell whatever infinite amount of boxes, you know, by this day. If there's anything else that you'd want. And I was like, you know what? I like that. Let me go ahead and get this, and this, because I was already thinking like, I'm going to buy more anyways. I might as well buy it from her because this girl is dialed in. So hopefully that kind of makes sense for you guys. I know we're not selling Girl Scout cookies, but the point is when you share your goals, you need to share your goals with intention, with a purpose. You need to make sure that people know that you're wanting to get after it. If your goal is that you want to sell a certain amount of Cutco to make a certain amount of money to pay for college, you need to share that because people love buying Cutco and they sure as hell love buying it from a Cutco rep who is dialed in. If you have a big goal that you're trying to sell, maybe not necessarily for the money, but maybe like prove something to yourself or like you just want to achieve at a high level or anything like that, those kinds of things, that's great. Share that stuff. People relish in that. They love people that are driven and goal oriented. Whatever your reason or whatever your purpose is, you need to have that completely crystal clear in front of your customer. Guys, I'm trying to personally sell $500,000 worth of knives this year. Been doing this for a long time. My goals are probably different than y'all's goals are, but my goals were very different when I was in college. But every single customer that I talked to so far this year and the rest of the year, I am telling all of them, my goal is sell $500,000 worth of Cutco this year. That would be my personal best year ever selling Cutco knives. Been doing this for a long time, but the reason why I'm trying to do this is one, it elevates me as like a rep. It also helps me with some goals that we're trying to accomplish sooner rather than later. And my goal is just really simple, is to work as hard as I can throughout this whole 12 months of the year. So that way I have my best year ever. So if there's anything that you're kind of sort of maybe even considering, whether now or into the future, I'll make sure to hook it up for you to make it work for you. I can't tell you how many customers so far this year have been like, add on that lock back. Sure, we'll go ahead and buy this because they love the fact that I'm really dialed into my goals. That stuff hits hard with people. Make sure don't undersell it. Okay, last point here for rapport, and this is probably the most important part. This is the formula of building rapport. It is 4 parts. You want to talk about skills for life? This is a skills for life moment. Like me, know me, trust me, pay me. Do that again. Like me, know me, trust me, pay me. So here's what this means. There's a process to establishing trust. And the way that you establish trust with someone is by going through these steps. A person has to like you before they want to get to know you. I'm sure we can all agree on that. Once people get to know you, they feel more comfortable with you and they begin establishing trust with you. And once you have trust with someone, people feel more comfortable making purchases with you or doing things with you. So this does apply to Cutco, but this applies to facts of life. People have to like you before they want to get to know you. They have to know you before they trust you. And once they trust you, they feel comfortable with you and they can make purchases with you and so on and so forth. So when we're talking about building rapport, what we're really talking about is establishing trust and comfortability. But it is a step-by-step process. So when I talk about like wanting to spend time at the beginning of the demo, what I'm doing is I'm just trying to get customers to like me. I've never met these people before, and they're probably going to spend a lot of money with me. So I want to make sure they feel comfortable with me. So at the very beginning of the demo, I know that's going to be coming later. So that's why I tried to play the game. I forgot to mention this earlier, so you can add this to your notes. At the beginning of the demo, I try to play the 20 questions game with my customer. The 20 questions game is my goal is to ask the customer 20 questions about themselves before I show them Cutco. And again, I know when I say that, sometimes newer reps are like, what the heck? How do I ask them 20 questions? Well, you have like your basic questions and you can go down a rabbit hole with someone pretty easily. For example, when you get to talk to Mr. and Mrs. Jones, say they're in their like 40s or 50s, they got a couple kids, whatever. You can ask them about their children. How many kids you got? Oh, that's awesome. You got 3. Where are they all in college or in grade school? It's like, oh, we got 2 in college, we got 1 in high school. Oh, that's great. Well, where do they go to school at? Oh, they do this and that. Awesome. Are they in any sports, extracurriculars? Oh, one's in baseball, this one's in band, this one's in football or volleyball or whatever. It's like, oh, awesome. Anything that you relate to, you can dive deeper on that. Guys, if I ever have a customer that talks about wrestling, because wrestling was like my life in high school, I dive down the rabbit hole with people when I see that they're wearing a wrestling shirt or they talk about wrestling or anything like that. If they talk about their dogs and you can tell they're passionate about their pets and everything, you can go down a rabbit hole on someone's pets really easily. You can ask them where they're from. Like, oh, we moved down from Michigan like 5 years ago. Oh, wow. Like, what part of Michigan? Oh, Detroit area. Well, what brought you here? Oh, a new job. Where do you work at? See where we're going with this? It takes practice, but the easiest way to get practice is to do it with other people from your office or your manager. Say, hey, this is 20 questions. I'm going to get better at building rapport. And Dante said I should reach out to you about like, let's practice this together. They'll role play with you. They'll practice. It's great. That's how you get people to like you. And then here's what inevitably happens on your demo. Eventually, once they've told you so much about themselves, they're eventually going to turn the table and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I've been talking about myself this whole time. Tell me about Cutco. Like, what do you do? Something about a scholarship and school and knives or whatever. Tell me about it. But now you have people that are genuinely interested in wanting to get to know you. That's when your goals come in. That's when your goals hit hard because they like you and they're trying to get to know you. So your goals are a perfect place for that. Now that they feel like they have a connection with you, trust has been established and your demo is going to go way better. And by the time you get to the homemaker set, they're going to be more open to saying yes to it because they like the knives. And if they feel like they're going to use it and they can afford it today, there's a good chance they're going to say yes. If they don't say yes to the homemaker, that's fine. You'll sell them something smaller. The point is that every time you walk out with a sale, you know you did a good job. So hopefully that kind of all makes sense for you guys. I know that was a lot of information. So I kind of want to set some time aside here for a few minutes for any people that need to ask any questions or need me to cover a couple of things here again, or maybe clarify in a different way as well. So I'll go ahead and open up the mic here. Do any of you guys have any questions or anything you want me to go over again? Nettie, Perla, Bridja, Cece, Anthony, anything you can think of? Or it was just immaculate, perfect, and we're all great and amazing now. If there are no questions, that's fine too.
I do have a question. I think I wrote it wrong, but when you said that I like the piece, but if they can get it without this,
Mhm.
that piece. So I wrote down, I probably wrote it wrong, but I wrote down even if you feel like you won't use this knife, it's easier than selling it or giving it away to just buy the whole set.
Mhm.
Did I put that correctly?
Kind of. So let me go ahead and copy paste it. So I put the link for the workshop agenda in there again, so you'll see it on there. And then here's the actual text for it. So even if you feel like you won't use this knife, it's still a better deal as a set.
Oh, okay.
It's still as a set and giving it away versus breaking it up and buying it piece by piece. Yeah, so whatever part you're missing in there, definitely get that cleaned up. Yeah, just keep that in your back pocket in case someone brings it up.
Okay, thank you.
For sure. Good question though. Do we have any other questions, guys? Because we're going to go into our phone jam here in a minute or so, if we don't have any more questions. Perfect. Well, I hope you guys learned a lot from that. So let's go ahead and switch gears because obviously the content is valuable. The skills are going to be useful. You're going to sell more Cutco now, I'm sure. But obviously that's only going to be helpful as if you have demos in front of your for your schedule. So it looks like we did pretty decent on the first wave of the calls with Anthony booking 2, CC booked 1, Brinja with 1, Nettie with 1, Cameron with 3, stuff like that. I don't think I got Perla's in there, so Perla, we can just add this in afterwards. But I'm going to give you guys about roughly 20 minutes to make another wave of calls, and I want to make sure we're all doing calls the right way. So there's 3 parts to making calls. First part is that you need to have that schedule. So thumbs up here if you all have your schedule in front of you ready to go, which means that you have all your demo times, all your availability over the next like 3 days at least. Yep. Okay. So don't book more than 3 days out. Again, cancels are never fun, but they are part of the job sometimes. So try to keep it within 3 days. Second part, you need to make sure you have that phone approach. So does everyone have their phone approach ready to go as well? Give a thumbs up if you do. Yes. Okay. So got to have your phone approach ready. That way, again, you don't sound like a dum-dum. Make sure you're consistent. Make sure you offer 1 day and 2 times when you're booking. Pro tip for y'all, don't ever exclude same day demos. If you don't have a full day today lined up and you have openings left, always throw it out to them about doing a same day demo. You'd be surprised how many people will say yes to it, and it leaves the next couple of days more available for other demos that you can get booked. If they say no to a same day demo for whatever reason, that's fine. Then we can just book them like normal. Third thing is you got to make sure you have your top 20 list at all given times. Always, 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 you should always have at least 20 people ready to go whenever you're making calls, which is pretty straightforward. So with that being said, like I said, I'm gonna give you guys a little less than 20 minutes. Our goal is to try and make 20 calls in that 20-minute span. Again, whether everyone answers or not very many people answer is irrelevant. It's all about just staying focused on the actions. So I'm gonna go and give you guys time to do that. And then at about a little before 9:30, I'll put a pause on it. I'll bring you guys back together. We'll get to your final stats. And then once we get your final stats, I'll have you guys text your demo times off to your manager, and then we'll adjourn at about 9:30 or so. Cool. All right, guys. So let's go ahead and get the phone jam going, and then I will go ahead and get you guys back together here in, like I said, less than 20 minutes.